this is Let's Talk. Getting to the root causes of the important issues of the day. This On the Air community forum believes your voice matters and welcomes all thoughts and views from you without judgment. Please join us today. The phone number in the studio is 415-663-8492 or 8317. And your hosts today, Shelley Rugg.
Good morning, Paul.
Good morning. Stephen Hurwitz.
It is a beautiful, fine morning.
At the controls. And I'm Paul Raffel. And when you do call in, and you know you will, please, you wait for Stephen to say you're on the air, and then turn down your radio. Give us a name that you want to be known by, and above all, keep the language clean, because this is live radio.
All right. So what are we talking about today?
Oh, I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, as if there isn't enough fun stuff to talk about.
Well, so it was actually Stephen sent me an email a couple of weeks ago about this. It's about it's called The Sins of the Fathers, but it's about how long should we, I'm kind of extrapolating it into personal sins as well. How long should we feel guilty not only for our own transgressions, whatever that might be? How long do we hold people responsible for their past transgressions? And how long should we hang on to collective guilt about things done by previous generations, by our fathers and grandfathers and grandmothers and great-grandfathers? Our young Germans are still feeling, national responsibility rather than national guilt is how they like to say.
Yeah.
That they're not guilty about it, but they feel responsible for the depredations of the Holocaust, and they're what have they done? I don't know. You're not allowed to use hate speech against Jews in Germany. You're not allowed to wave Nazi flags, although neo-Nazis are on the rise again in Europe. And
we're sure allowed to wave them here in this country.
Well, free speech.
So in an effort to assuage guilt, they're creating legislation to try and correct some of the issues?
Well, they did, yes, long ago. I mean, it was interesting. I was just reading this. There's a great article, not a new one, but there's one in the Atlantic. Are today's Germans morally responsible for the Holocaust? Because, young Germans are still feeling, I'm calling it guilt about it. And there's another one on eon.co called History and Guilt, and it's about not just the Holocaust but slavery, and in this country she's contrasting the Nazis with the Holocaust with the Holocaust that happened here a couple of times. Ask a Native American how
I think they're really different
issues.
issues, though.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Well, I think that if I were a German, I don't think I would feel responsible to this juncture. I think that really the generation that lived through it, that shared responsibility, that were part of it, I think that those people actually, they're rightfully had to consider what their actions were and how they participated. And in many cases, I think that probably they were also victims. But I think today, in the United States, we're the remnants. It hasn't ended, essentially. It's not over. The system that we live by has not ceased to incorporate the wrongs of the past. And if you look at a timeline of African American freedom, if you look, most of it was slavery, and the time period where they have had some semblance of freed, quote unquote. Then you had apartheid. So really, today it still hasn't ended in that respect.
There's still
And
institutional racism at work.
yes, exactly.
And I chose to be an American, but you two are Americans. How do you feel about slavery and do you feel generational guilt for it?
I don't think I do. I think that if new generations are able to look at things and start to evolve things into a more positive outcome for more people, that's a good thing. But I don't know about feeling guilty about it. I was telling somebody that our topic today is sins of the fathers, and she said, well, what about the gifts? So do we, if we had a famous opera singer in our past, are we responsible for that? So if you flip it like that, then, we didn't do the thing. But now that we're here and we see it as something that was wrong, then it's up to us to try to right it. But it's not that we're guilty of it.
Okay. But is there still a responsibility to, for example, try whatever we can to get this racism out of the culture?
I mean, I think
support whatever it takes to do that. How about reparations, for example?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I think the human condition in general, we want to work towards getting rid of racism, but reparations, yeah.
Well, affirmative action in some sense was a gesture towards that, wouldn't you say?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And busing.
School busing. And they're all out of favor, actually.
Right.
Amongst other things.
But for the people who were benefiting from that, if they were benefiting, I don't know, did busing make it worse?
Was that a good thing? I know that, my kids weren't bused, but I chose to put them in a school that wasn't where they could walk. And what I noticed a difference between when I went to school, where we all walked to school, and as you walked through the neighborhood, the group would get larger and you'd all go to school together. We'd play together after school. But when you're going to a school that's outside of your neighborhood, you don't have those particular social aspects of being in a neighborhood school.
Especially when it's kind of enforced mixing
and then
people who lived in a predominantly African-American neighborhood were told they had to go to, they were told they had to, right? I mean, didn't it become municipal regulation that there was enforced busing?
Right.
I don't remember.
I
wasn't here then.
I don't know if you ever heard that, but I've read that people say that Bill Clinton was the first black president.
What?
Well, he grew up. I know, but he grew up in a milieu that was black, and in
Little Rock.
Is he from Little
How
Rock?
about George Wallace? Was he the first black governor of Alabama?
Well, that's interesting because in many ways, though, people from the South have had a lot more, for better or for worse, but have had a lot more contact and experience with a culture where there are more African Americans mixed within the society, not as segregated, say, as it is in the North.
Really?
It seems that way to me.
Oh, that's an interesting.
I think we're still very segregated in the North.
Yeah, everywhere, I think. And I think a lot of the old racist tropes are still working very well down in the South.
Granted.
And in the North. I mean, everywhere.
Wherever
right?
they need
beings.
to harbor that racism.
There's the thing.
Racism, I think, makes them feel safe somehow.
Can we get away from that?
I feel guilty for human beings. That's my...
Yes.
I think we're just the worst species ever devised.
Well, we
Terrible
can be,
things.
but we can be great, too.
For
Come
ourselves.
on, Paul. We can be great for each other,
ourselves.
too.
Yes, for our own species, not for any other species. Yes, thank you very much. Yes, music is a wonderful thing. Ask a meerkat how it feels about Beethoven. It doesn't care. Anyway, so that's my feeling of responsibility. So I thought there was an interesting article written by a German-born Jew, Yascha Mounk, who wrote a book called Stranger in My Own Country. He was in 90s Germany. He was growing up in Germany, and he felt like an outsider because of this very heavy feeling that even young Germans his age, and the next generation after them, their children, feel about their country having created, basically, Germany and Austria having created, and all their minions, I mean, everyone involved, almost everyone, their parents, were involved in this thing that wiped out millions of people for absolutely no reason.
Wow.
And so they were sort of pussyfooting around him and awkwardly telling jokes to kind of feel like, oh, we're all one. But it was he never felt like he was German. He always felt different. Because he was treated differently. There was some kind of, not a barrier, but he was treated differently from the way others of his friends treated each other.
So what was new? I mean, it's always been that way.
Well, this is the thing. So it hasn't changed anything. So what he believes what has also spawned is the rise of neo-Nazism. The fact that it's still going is because the Nazis can still point to Jews in Germany and say, they're not us. They are not German. And that's how he ended up feeling. That's why he moved to New York City, because, 1.5 million Jews in New York City. He felt a little closer to his kind, whatever that means.
Right.
I mean, he's not even a religious Jew. He's just, like you.
Yeah, I'm wondering though. Thanks, but I am Jewish identified, and there are. My father used to call people stomach Jews in a sense.
What does that mean? They just like the food?
Identify with the cooking.
The cooking, yeah.
Really? Might have a stomach
attack.
The
kugel.
But I think racism is so deeply rooted in American society that I'm wondering if we'll ever become a culture that is not, in some sense, racist.
It almost does sort of feel like we need separate islands. We need an island for the people who want to be racist, and we want it to all be one, homogenized group of humans. And then another island for the rest of us who can get along and enjoy each other's differences.
Well, I'm tempted to say, this is what happened. This is it's kind of happening because, should I say this?
Do it.
Urban versus rural. People who have traveled and who maybe a little more educated, whatever. People tend to gravitate towards cities. I don't think that's a good thing. I hate cities, but there you go. And compared with rural, and if you look at the red and blue maps of political parties in the United States, it's all the rural states. And they're all their little cities. Sandusky, Ohio, is probably Democratic.
I don't know. They just made a holiday. Election day is now a holiday in Sandusky.
Yeah, there you go. See, so in the cities tend to be more liberal. Why is that? I don't know. I think it's because people wanted to get away from some of the more less cosmopolitan ideas that are in rural society, because in rural society you're taking care of yourself mostly. You're not You're not living in this ridiculous big beehive of people bustling all around you. You are looking after your ranch or your farm or your business or whatever, and you know everybody around, but it's small town stuff.
Right.
Anyway, that's
Well,
nothing
really,
to do with what we're talking about.
Yeah. I think you're pushing it, by the way.
Really?
Yeah.
Almost every city in the United States is a blue city.
Yes, and I think that one of the reasons, though, are that when people become more highly educated, they're looking for a more culture. The small town doesn't really provide that. I think there are a lot of there are economic opportunities that are larger metropolitan areas offer for more highly educated people.
Right.
I think there's a lot of draws. I think there. I don't think it's necessarily that they're moving because they want to leave the. Well, I grew up in a small town. You mentioned Sandusky, and I grew up. I did not feel discrimination whatsoever as a child growing up there. It wasn't until I had contact with people from the South actually that I actually experienced that.
When was that? What happened? I mean, there was.
Well, nobody ever called me a kike when I was in Sandusky.
Oh.
Nobody ever referred to it. It might have been there, and maybe the kids, didn't have it. But I was never singled out in a derogatory way for the fact that I was Jewish, and they made fun a little bit. We had these Hebrew letters on the temple, and they thought they said, "Is that a Chinese restaurant?"
Well,
I don't think that was so bad.
But okay, so how well, yeah. Anyway, the subject today. Do call, won't you? We're kind of going all over the map here. 415-663-8492 or 8317 is the number. Give us a call. What you think about what is the statute of limitations on collective guilt or responsibility for transgressions, for terrible things that were done by previous generations. Because it's certainly, excuse me, but in like in the Middle East, they remember everything that's done to them.
True.
If there were one or two survivors of the Canaanites, they hate the Israelis. And that was Old Testament times when the Israelites wiped out the Canaanites.
I just want to add one thing, is that I think the history of the United States is a history with multiple victims. It's not just African Americans that are the big victims. The Irish, when they came to the United States, that era was the Civil War was going on, and they were immediately drafted. They put their foot on the shore and they grabbed them, put a gun in their hand, and sent them to the bloodiest war in our nation's history. So, do you want to look and see what this country did to the Irish and how they were victims? As an example?
Well, of course, the Irish were victims of the English.
Yes,
that's
right.
why they came.
Oh, so they could be re-victimized.
Yes. Oh, yeah. So if they thought it was going to be better over here, even though they were victimized for a generation or two until the Poles arrived, or the Czechs or the Jews. They wouldn't let the Jews in at first, and then they did. Right? I mean, there was always another wave of immigrants that we could blame, that Americans could blame for anything or look down on.
Yeah.
And keep out of the country club.
A funny thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not really. It's a terrible thing.
Funny
and,
meaning
as I say,
odd.
That's why I'm a bit of a misanthrope. But there you are. So how long? I don't actually. I feel not guilt, but I certainly know enough about my birth country's history. England, its history in the world was certainly a bloody one, right from the beginning. I mean, oof, we did some terrible things. The Crusades, how about that? That was fun, wasn't it? The king actually went on crusade, and just on the way through Europe, they'd slaughter a few Jews wherever they could find them, and on their way to slaughter Muslims in
They're still blamed for the
Jerusalem,
Crusades,
in
actually.
the Holy Land.
It's really, isn't it fascinating? Here they are thinking they're better. They need to eliminate this group of people when they're being horrible people themselves.
Yes.
It's
White Europeans,
wow.
I'm telling you. We are the scourge of the earth. But I do feel there is a sort of latent responsibility, I feel, for that. I mean, I certainly know that I am not a patriot of any country. I do not. I mean, nobody used to wave flags in England anyway, but they do now because Americans taught them to do it. I would never say that the UK was the greatest nation on earth, or France, or anybody else, because all those European nations did horrible things as they colonized the rest of the world.
Right.
And there were horrible things going on in other countries too. I mean, every tribe slaughtering each other.
Right here in America.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
I don't know, how long does it last? And let's just posit the question: if this isn't, if that's too difficult a question, how long should we feel guilty about the sins of our fathers? How about our own sins? How about should Kevin Hart be held responsible for a homophobic tweet he made? What was it? 20 years ago? Is he a different person now? Can we be rehabilitated?
Maybe there's some guilty people out there that want to come in.
Should Brett Kavanaugh have been raked over the coals for something he did when he was a teenager?
Well, it did bring out the side of him, didn't it?
It did. But is he a different person now? I mean, can we ever be rehabilitated or forgiven? Can we ever get absolution from our society?
I think the hardest, you can forgive others. The hardest thing is to forgive yourself, personally, I think. And they always say forgiveness is not for the other person. Forgiveness is for ourselves. Oh. It's a weight that we carry, and we can help lighten that load, so to speak. I just want to ask 663-8492. Please call in. We know there are people out there feeling guilt towards.
Well,
and so you should.
Aside from guilt, thinking about things that happen in our family legacy that sort of get passed through the genes, Well,
exactly.
We hold things from our past, from our ancestors' past, and so it's almost like going through the life. Our life is partly about healing that and looking at that, and hopefully evolving it further for the next generation. At least that's what I try to do.
Yeah.
I think that's true. We carry that history, and we carry the family history. But yet, the part of the family history are grandparents who may have been escaping persecution in Europe. So, when you consider that, where does that put you? It's say, hey, we were coming over here, our family from the same, with the same motivations to escape. So why am I responsible?
It's what most immigrants to the U.S. were all about, have been about. They're all escaping, or either they're escaping poverty and they heard there was gold to be dug up in them hills, or they were just escaping terrible racist.
But even as my grandparents came over, they benefited from a white capitalist system that in this country, African Americans, in some sense, were restricted in enjoying those benefits for many, many years. And in fact, if you read your history, when African American neighborhoods in the 1920s sprang in, there were race riots. Neighborhoods were burned down. Business districts were burned down in this country. Santa Rosa has a history of burning the Chinese community out. They never came back, but there was a fairly lively Chinese community in Santa Rosa, and they were chased out. And Sonoma County had a very large Ku Klux Klan.
Is that so?
That's right.
Ah, interesting.
Oh dear. Yeah, it's fascinating that human beings can be so afraid of each other that they choose, rather than to try to understand, they choose to to eliminate the other in by whatever means possible. Wow.
Yeah, I know. Well, we're awful. Let's face it.
We can tell that you feel pretty guilty.
Oh, I do. I do
all.
For humans. Oh, my goodness. I mean, who wouldn't? Look at what we're doing. Here's another thing.
Climate change.
Are our children, not my children, I have none, but are our children going to hate us? Are our grandchildren going to hate us, our generation, because we didn't do anything about it?
They might not have a chance.
Yeah, they might not have a chance.
It might all go away.
For other reasons, they'll hate us. But, we're closing in on time to thank people. Do you think it's too early? I'm 2 minutes off, a minute and a half.
You start doing the underwriting.
Oh, good. Let me do that. Let me talk about some of the people that underwrite this program. The Dance Palace Community Center, Community and Cultural Center, located at 5th and B. Yes, it's member-supported, and they offer classes, events, facility rentals for all the communities of West Marin. Membership information, volunteer opportunities, and schedules available at 415-663-1075 and online at dancepalace.org. And Hog Island Oyster Company, which is they are a California benefit corporation farming oysters on Tamales Bay since 1983 and cultivating a bay-to-bar experience. It's tough to say. San Francisco and Napa welcoming Tony's Seafood Restaurant in Marshall as their newest bay-to-bar restaurant. Information online at hogislandoysters.com and Tony'sSeafoodRestaurant.com.
Opening tomorrow night.
That's right.
All right.
And where? That's odd. Why am I confused?
I don't know, Stephen.
Well,
look on the list, perhaps.
Yes, here we are. I couldn't find it. Willow Creek Wealth Management, serving the North Bay since 1984, offering independent, fee-only wealth consultation. Information available at willowcreekwealth.com. There we go. We did it.
This is KWMR 90.5 in Point Reyes Station, 89.9 in Bolinas, 92.3 in San Geronimo Valley. All survivors of the deluge that we just had.
Yes, finally could get through on Levee Road.
Glad most of us got through it without too many terrible things happening. So how about religion?
How about it?
We're still paying for the sins of Adam and Eve, apparently.
Oh, no.
Right? Are we not still held accountable? That's why...
Well, I guess that's why we're
all sinners.
Overpopulation on the planet.
We are all sinners, and we are still making up for the sins of Adam and Eve.
Well, I guess you have to...
I'm speechless.
So how about promoting guilt for things that is truly beyond our control, I would say, religious guilt. From my point of view, as a self-confessed misanthrope, I would say we should feel guilty, but not because Adam and Eve ate at fruit from the tree of knowledge. Anyway, interesting thing. We're talking about collective guilt, kind of the sins of our fathers. What's the statute of limitations on how guilty we should feel? And is guilt is it a stultifying thing? Does it mean that we don't get things done, that we don't do reparations of any kind, or we don't have, as they did in South Africa, a wonderful thing, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. That was a incredible thing after years of apartheid, years of cruelty and terrible behavior on behalf of the Brits and the Dutch against Africans. They said, okay, the only way to get around this is to invite people to come along and talk about their experiences on all sides of the question. Get it out in the open and grant immunity to people who've done terrible things, but it was the way things ran, right?
So
an amazing thing. I'm not sure
it changed anything.
Did it change it? Oh, yeah. Well, the Africans are in charge. The black Africans are in charge of South Africa. ANC.
I don't think that the opportunities, though, are. I don't think there's the opportunities that you would expect that might happen with the change of leadership.
Oh, really? Go ahead. Tell me more.
Yeah, what do you mean?
Well, I think it's been business as usual, really. The
white people are still running the gold mines.
And
the blacks are working in them.
There you go.
Well, that's true. But there is not institutional racism, violence against a certain group, except there is racism. The other racism, because, let's face it, black Africans are humans as well, and humans are just racists. Let's put it that way. So there's been a certain backlash, certainly there, and in the country to the west of South Africa. Oh, dear.
Namibia,
and in Nigeria, and in Kenya. The retributions are more violent than reconciliatory, let's put it that way. But I thought that Truth and Reconciliation Commission was fantastic. It wasn't like Americans and white Europeans had the Nuremberg trials, right? You pick out a few top dogs, some of the worst commanders, and you say, okay, you're responsible for this. Meanwhile, as in West Germany was basically, during the 60s, being run by ex-Nazis, because that's who was there, that generation. And there was apparently more in West Germany than there were in East Germany, because when the Russians started coming towards Berlin, the Nazis knew that they were told that after all the decade of communist Jews, as communist Zionism
rooted out,
coming towards them, they all fled to West Germany. So East Germany was full of people who wanted to make a change and make it communist. West Germany was full of Nazis. They were the ones who were running the country.
Hey, guess what?
And by the way, let's not forget the Nazis that we brought over here, because they'd be useful to us.
We have a caller, by the way.
Yes.
Hey, caller, I'm going to put you on the air. Your name, please, and
Sally. And I know I'll keep it clean.
Yeah.
Good job, Sally.
Thank you, Shelley. I couldn't do it without your support. I wanted to recommend a show called Black Earth Rising. It's on Netflix. So for those who have Netflix, it's about the prosecution of international war criminals in conjunction with the Rwandan genocide, the Tutsis and the Hutus, and the crimes perpetrated there in Rwanda. It's a very interesting, nuanced show that I learned a lot from watching it myself. So,
what's the name again?
Black Earth Rising.
Is it a series, like a TV series?
It's a one-season kind of series, and it is so it's one season, but as Netflix works, you can binge watch it. You can watch all the episodes however quickly you want.
Right.
And because I think this April is the 25th anniversary of that genocide.
Oh wow!
As the Tutsi minorities and moderate Hutus were murdered by the majority Hutus, who had been actually whipped into a frenzy. That sort of mob mentality took over. The leaders whipped the majority Hutus into this sort of homicidal frenzy, which is perhaps the most hideous and upsetting aspect of human nature, other than complacency in the face of our Earth just being ruined by all the crap,
right.
the plastic and the poisons, toxics that we're putting into the oceans. And so I think about this a lot. I feel a kind of base level of sadness and depression, I'm not going to lie, about all this stuff. And I don't think you can hide from it. I don't think you can sort of shut it down and pretend it's not happening.
Does it make you want to get into any kind of action?
It does, but I'm so overwhelmed that I can't figure out which direction to move.
Yeah. Literally,
I cannot figure it out, and I'm particularly upset about the decimation of the elephant population. That's been really stepped up. A lot of more elephants are being killed, and that's very upsetting. And so it's not just crimes perpetrated on people, torture and misery. It's also our brethren, our mammalian brethren, well, everything that lives.
Right, the whole entire planet and everything on it.
Yeah, I think our biggest crime is that we are deluded into feeling really with the conviction that we are superior and that we are separate. It is a deadly conviction.
Mm-hmm.
So, yay! Hey, cocktail.
Thank you for this.
Welcome to the ranks of the what is it? The I've forgotten the name now. See, I am one, but I've forgotten the name.
And the lumpen proletariat.
We who hate our self-hating species.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if self-hatred is the term. It's that. I mean, it certainly doesn't not factor in. It's just
misanthrope.
We need to really understand. We need to take responsibility. I think that the first act of reparations towards anyone or any being that's been wronged is to take responsibility. So when you talk about the newest Supreme Court judge, what's his face?
Kavanaugh.
McGroperton. He's a really extraordinary example of someone who is unrepentant and arrogant and entitled. And he not only do I believe Dr. Ford, I'm absolutely sure that this happened to her, but the dynamic between their ages, I may have said this before on your show, she was like 15 and he was something like 17 or 18. That age differential and that power differential is profound at that age and in the pecking system of a social system. In that arena, and I really feel that he's a really particularly terrible person. I really do.
And unrepentant, so...
But
I mean, not only unrepentant, but a whiny baby who really couldn't man up. He couldn't even handle what he was hearing with any equanimity.
I think that's right.
Whatsoever. I mean, he failed on all points.
The sad thing is there's so many like him.
Yeah.
The most shocking thing to me, that to go back to something earlier you said, is that this stuff is it's hiding just under the surface. All it really needs is something to, look at all the fascism and all the hatred that's coming forward right now, that Trump has sort of given these people permission to come out of the woodwork. The shocking thing is, like in the Hutus and the Tutus, they may have lived together peaceably for generations, and then all of a sudden, I might be wrong, there might have been tremendous animosity between the groups, but it just seems that it's lurking there.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with that at all, and I would love to let you go and continue on with this fascinating topic.
Thank you for calling, Sally.
I'll mix myself a stiff drink.
Excellent. Good idea.
Thank you so much.
Little lemonade.
Thanks for calling, Sally.
Bye.
Bye.
And yes, this is Let's Talk Call-In Radio. Give us a call, 415-663-8492. We're talking about the sins of the fathers and other sins, and how long should we feel guilty for or responsible for our own sins if we change?
Well, how about this? Okay, so sins of the fathers that created this terrible climate change problem that we're dealing with right now, or that we aren't dealing with but really need to. I agree with Sally. There's so much wrong on the planet right now. It's really can feel overwhelming and hard to choose if you want to help in any way. Where am I going to put my energy to really make a difference? And it occurred to me recently that climate change is the one, because none of the rest of it matters if we don't have a planet we can live on.
True.
So I encourage everybody to embrace dealing with climate change.
And I'd add one more thing to the climate change. But as the climate changes, there is going to be a tremendous amount of change in the world. Bangladesh, for example, there's 250 million people there, and most of them live in a river delta area.
In a floodplain, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, where are they going to go? You're going to find tremendous conflict there. And I just wanted to know,
a lot of migrations.
Yeah, so you think immigration's a problem now.
Right.
Do you think it's worse, though? I mean, when you look back, it may be, but when you look back in time, there have been some horrendous events that have taken place that and more dramatic than perhaps things we're experiencing now. For the partition of when the British left India, the partition between Hindus and Muslims. I mean,
who had lived together
millions
for
and millions
centuries.
of people died from that.
Yeah, awful. There is nowhere, not a square foot of earth, I'm guessing, that has not been affected by human hatred.
So are we better off, though, Paul? Are we better off? I mean,
are we better off?
Yeah,
than...
I mean, are we having less human hatred now than before?
No,
I don't think so.
No, not at all. There's nothing to support that at all.
I
think within.
I think Steven Pinker thinks we're less violent now, but wait and see what happens
certainly
when there are mass migrations. Oof.
There are lovely pockets of beauty,
of course,
and love.
Some people are wonderful.
Thank goodness.
We all have the ability to be lovely people and to care about other beings on the planet.
How do we assuage the fear?
Don't.
Because I think fear is at the core of racism. Fear of the other, who is different.
Absolutely.
Right? So if we can address the fear instead of saying, pointing fingers and saying, stop being racist. You shouldn't be racist. Right. Instead, we need to really address what is at the heart of the fear.
Excellent. No, that's great. That's very, very good. Stop being racist, which is what which is what happened here, right? They passed laws about they finally passed a law that said you couldn't lynch people anymore, which was not until like the 50s, I think, or maybe even later. But you cannot be racist anymore. This is what
stirred people up,
has caused this. Put him online
with Trump.
Oh, we do have somebody online.
And this is what has it's been so frustrating for people who do feel fear and xenophobia and think other people, different people, are coming and threatening our way of life. But I can't talk about it because of political correct. They do all that stuff.
Right.
And now they're free to express.
And let's see if our caller wants to talk about it. Hello, you're on the air. Who's calling, please?
Hi, Stephen. It's MK.
Hey, MK.
Hello, MK.
I'm sitting here listening to you guys and listening to Sally, and I'm not sure what this remorse, this whether it's real or fake. I don't it's so hard to tell in the climate of the world right now.
It's fake.
What's sincere and what isn't? Because what do we gain from feeling sorry or guilty or whatever it is for the things that our precursors have done if we aren't paying attention enough to not do it again?
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I think we should. it just seems to me that human beings just cannot learn from history. And it's going on and over again. And the more money you have, the safer you are. And supposedly, of course, when the water's lapping up around your door, and then because of climate change, then your money's not going to help, except it will, because you can just move someplace higher. I just
Right.
I don't want to be filled with despair and sadness, because it's a beautiful day here too. Finally, but
Yeah.
It's very bewildering to try to. Just, I'm sorry, I'm not Jewish, but I'm feel terrible about a lot of the things, and I have a very, very dear friend whose father was Tutsi and was murdered by Idi Amin, and that the trickle down repercussions of that sort of stuff is it's a lifetime.
Right.
It's a whole lifetime.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm adding anything to this. It's just that I'm bewildered once again by the, I don't know if it's apathy or it's terror or what is it?
I think
we're moving forward.
I think change comes. It's a function of how much it affects the status quo. The status quo has a tremendous momentum, and it's difficult to move that. The propaganda that is paid for and perpetuated. How do you move the needle?
I don't know. I don't mean to change the subject, but yesterday I was watching the Cohen hearings, and he sat there and he said that the president was a con man and a liar and a cheat. And he sat there and said that, and nothing happened. Some people got up and said, "Gee, you're being mean to the president." But it's so shallow. It's so unbelievably uncaring, and I know there are people that care.
The system, the way we have it set up, it's so formal, and there's so much game playing going on that it can leave you feeling like your jaw drops, and you're like, can't we just be real people here and say real things?
Defines what real is.
Right.
I'm not out to get ahead at this point, but I can certainly see a lot of people who are.
Well, so there's Cohen is an example of so he says, he's an example of someone who is trying to make up for his past actions. He feels really guilty about the way he was a lapdog for our president, and
he's boogied right along doing it.
Yes, he did, but he is now he's been caught. And he's going.
He got caught.
Yeah, right, exactly. But there's another question: how do we rehabilitate ourselves? A felon goes to prison, serves his full time, perhaps, has an exemplary record in prison, comes out, is not allowed to vote in many states, and would we employ a convicted felon? When does rehabilitation? When does that reparation?
Maybe when the prisons aren't privatized anymore, and we actually care about rehabilitating people.
That's a tall order.
That's a whole nother topic.
So, I'm very happy to listen to you every Thursday.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, thanks. Okay.
I'm so glad you called in.
I hope the water goes down and doesn't mess up everybody's house and my poor daughter. God.
Yeah, I saw the picture of the moat.
Oh yeah, the moat. We should have always wanted a moat. She's a big moat, big dry moat. Okay, carry on, and
thank you.
I hope somebody has more brains than I do.
No.
Well, thanks so much for chiming in, MK.
Yeah, okay, take care.
I think octopuses really have more brains
than humans. Well, turn her off there.
There we go. Whoop.
And so, trying to deal with it, trying to make people nicer. Again, we go back to Germany. From the 60s on, once the children of the ex-Nazis were growing up and being more conscious and were in university and were being taught history and all that. And the changes started to happen there. That was when all these regulations came into being, and when they were trying to rebuild their the society, trying to rid their society of racism, that kind of institutional racism that could give rise to people just going along with a murderous regime. It became sort of regulated, and you were not allowed to say certain things. And has it worked? Is it according to, again, I go back to this article. According to this Jewish guy who was born in Germany, he didn't feel that it was working because it still created an us and them scenario where you had to. I don't know, and there's certain aspects of that here. I think. How do you make reparations to Native Americans and to Black Americans for the things that were done to them in our expansion? And we're living off the benefits of all that genocide that was perpetrated by our forefathers. So how do you do that without, first of all, burying very human xenophobia? How do you overcome xenophobia? Does it take away the responsibility once you have these things in place, whatever you can devise, like the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa? Once that was completed, did that make everything okay? Or do people still have strong feelings, still have racist feelings? Of course, I don't know what the answer is.
I think it's going to take a long, long time to work it all out. But hopefully, if people do have some kind of guilt that rises up, that they can be part of the solution and, find ways to make the world a better place, a little bit at a time. When we step up and out to set examples, be active and be visible in, saying what needs to be said in in a situation, doing things that need to be done. Let people see you do it, and hopefully, that will inspire them to do something similar.
I'd just like to throw one more thing in. It's from an article in The Atlantic that I picked up. It says, the answer is not about being individually responsible through our genes, but collectively accountable for the structural inequalities that have passed down through generations to shape today's world. So
we should feel responsibility.
Yes, accountable to make the changes, actually.
For 3 or 4 generations, as God would say.
I would say as long as those inequities continue.
Yeah. So I think I would guess that the main feeling among America as a whole, USA as a whole, is that there is a feeling of responsibility, of guilt, of accountability among certainly urban white people who accept that slavery was a terrible thing, and what can we possibly do? There's a lot of breast beating about it. How can we make it better? I feel guilty. How can I make it better? But what actually gets done?
I think it was very popular at a certain period of time. When's the last time you read an article? The articles that I picked up were from 1989 or whatever. These are all older articles. I just don't see it being published today.
Well, so and another article about Green Book. It was actually, remember Chula Gemignani wrote a big Facebook post about her. She thought Green Book was a great movie and that it showed the redemption of a terrible white person thanks to the example of the black person he was escorting around. Whereas African Americans, Spike Lee, and the other black Americans who were in the audience at the Oscars were all going, man. Spike Lee almost walked out because it was made by white men about this white man who was shepherding around a black man whose family was not consulted about the portrayal of his character.
Really?
So there it is, us and them.
We have to tread lightly.
How do you bridge the us and them? Maybe let's do that some other time.
We got to mix it up a little more, I guess.
Anyway, thank you for listening, if you were listening, and thank you for calling in to our callers. We're here every Thursday at 11. KWMR does not take a stand on any of the issues discussed on Let's Talk. Opinions expressed on this program are those of the hosts and callers and don't necessarily reflect the views of KWMR, its board of directors, underwriters, or members. Yes, we'll be back next Thursday. Thanks to everybody. Thank you, Shelley. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Paul.
And see you later.